In the heart of a vast and ancient land, where the golden hues of the desert met the shimmering promise of modernity, a fateful auction was underway, a spectacle that would irrevocably alter the lives of all involved. At the center of this drama was Zara, a resilient young mother, whose eyes betrayed the many hardships she had endured in her struggle to provide for her beloved son Rayyan. Fate, it seemed, had led her to this very moment, a moment charged with both despair and reluctant hope. It began on a sultry evening inside a grand hall adorned with opulent chandeliers and gilded accents. Amid the soft murmur of a sophisticated crowd, a singular event unfolded. An auction where women, seen as commodities by the powerful elite, were sold to the highest bidder. Zara, desperate and with no alternatives left, found herself seated in a secluded corner of the hall, her body trembling with the burden of a choice that had been forced upon her rather than freely chosen. Every glance from the elegantly dressed men around her seemed to weigh her down further, a painful reminder of the dehumanizing circumstances that had driven her here. As the ticking clock marked the passage of moments, Zara's heart pounded in her chest with a mix of terror and determination. Thoughts of her young son Rayyan, who was being cared for by an elderly neighbor in her modest apartment, mingled with memories of overdue bills, the looming specter of eviction, and nights filled with hunger and uncertainty. It was these dire realities that had compelled her to enter an auction where human dignity was bartered like precious art. With every beat of her heart, the magnitude of her sacrifice became more painfully clear. The evening's proceedings took on an almost surreal quality as a sharply dressed man with a rehearsed smile, the event organizer, approached Zara. His voice was a blend of calculated charm and cold authority, as he instructed, "Remember, Zara, keep your composure, offer a polite smile, and avoid making direct eye contact with the guests." With those words, he drifted away, leaving her alone with the heavy responsibility of the moment. All around her, men in impeccably tailored suits scrutinized each woman with the intensity of art critics, appraising a rare masterpiece. Soon, Zara's name was announced as lot number 23, in a theatrical tone that resonated through the hall. Summoning every ounce of courage, she ascended a staircase to a dazzlingly illuminated stage. The radiant lights were overwhelming, their brilliance momentarily robbing her of vision while the intense heat of the spotlights elicited beads of sweat on her brow. Even as she attempted to hold her head high, the predatory stares of the onlookers made her feel vulnerable and exposed. The organizer's voice continued to embellish her beauty with a series of extravagant adjectives, deepening the feeling of objectification and heightening her inner turmoil. A murmur of approval swept through the crowd until a commanding, resonant voice broke the ambience of calculated anticipation. $1 million, the voice declared, and all eyes in the hall swiftly turned toward the distinguished gentleman seated at the far end. His skin was a warm bronze, his eyes piercing with an intensity that left no room for doubt about his authority. This imposing figure was none other than Rashid Al-Mansour, a renowned Middle Eastern magnate celebrated for his immense wealth and discreet demeanor. The organizer, visibly taken aback by the audacity of the opening bid, repeated the figure in a tone of incredulity. No subsequent bids followed. "Sold," the organizer announced with a satisfied smirk, as Rashid's bid was accepted without contest. With that single word, Zara's destiny was sealed. Though her legs threatened to buckle beneath the weight of the moment, she managed to maintain a semblance of composure as she descended from the stage. In that instant, her entire life was transformed by a transaction that had stripped her of agency. Rashid rose from his seat and approached Zara with a demeanor as calm and enigmatic as ever. His gaze, both intense and unreadable, met hers as he stated in a measured tone, "We must discuss the terms." Extending a hand as a guide, he led her toward a secluded private room, where the full implications of her decision were to be formalized. Inside this elegantly appointed chamber, the fate of Zara's future was to be etched in ink and bound by contract. The room exuded refinement. Plush furniture, delicate ornaments, and soft lighting created an atmosphere of refined opulence. Rashid motioned for Zara to take a seat in an inviting armchair before stepping over to a nearby table where an envelope, pre-arranged for this moment, awaited her attention. "Here is the contract," he said, his voice measured yet firm, handing her the document with a hint of finality. As Zara took the contract in trembling hands, the silence that enveloped the room grew ever more oppressive. She began to read the contents of the document, her pulse quickening with each passing clause. The initial statements were formal and matter-of-fact, but as she progressed toward the heart of the agreement, her breath grew shallow and her eyes widened in disbelief. "You want me to conceive a child for you, and then relinquish all maternal rights?" she asked, her voice wavering between indignation and sorrow. Rashid's response was equally unyielding. With arms crossed in silent assertion, he confirmed, "I need an heir. Once the child is born, you will have no further claim or responsibility." The stark truth of the contract left Zara reeling. Overwhelmed by a surge of indignation and despair, she struggled to reconcile her desperate need to secure a future for Rayyan with the unthinkable reality of relinquishing her maternal bond. "I cannot do this. I will not abandon my own flesh and blood," she protested, her voice rising with a blend of defiance and anguish. Rashid's gaze remained steely as he replied in a tone devoid of empathy. "You knew the consequences when you stepped into this auction. There is no turning back now." His words resonated in the quiet room as Zara clutched the contract, her inner conflict surging like a storm. "Do you truly believe you can simply purchase a future, then cast aside the mother as if she were disposable?" she demanded. Rashid stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, and stated with resolute finality, "I paid $1 million for you, Zara. This is not a decision born of whimsy, it is a binding agreement." The room's oppressive silence underscored the inevitability of her fate. Before Zara could muster any further objection, Rashid placed a sleek pen on the table and ordered, "Sign the contract. Once the child is born, you will receive the money and be free to resume your life." In that charged moment, as Zara's hands trembled with a mix of fury, sorrow, and resignation, she contemplated Rayyan, the innocent soul for whom this harrowing sacrifice was being made. With tears welling in her eyes yet resolutely held back, she whispered, "This is not right," before finally succumbing to the inexorable pressure of her circumstances and signing her destiny away. Rashid accepted the document with a curt nod and calmly informed her, "Very well. Tomorrow morning we will proceed with the necessary medical examinations. Prepare yourself for the next step at my mansion." With those words, he departed the room, leaving Zara alone to grapple with the enormity of her irreversible decision. Her eyes lingered on the inked signature, a permanent mark that sealed her fate. The following morning, a sleek limousine arrived outside Zara's modest apartment, heralding the beginning of a journey into an unfamiliar world of luxury and despair. The farewell to Rayyan was brief and painful. She explained to him that she had to travel far away for work, promising to call him as often as possible. Rayyan, with an innocent smile and uncomprehending cheer, waved goodbye, oblivious to the heavy sacrifice his mother was making. The ride to the mansion was shrouded in silence as Zara gazed out the window, watching the barren desert gradually yield to an expanse of modern, extravagant architecture. Upon arrival, the majestic property, guarded by towering iron gates and boasting meticulously manicured gardens, rendered her speechless. Rashid awaited her at the entrance, his expression somber and unyielding as he guided her inside, succinctly outlining the mansion's rules and expectations. "You will be granted your privacy. Yet I expect you to fulfill your obligations as per our agreement," Rashid declared, before leaving her in the care of a kindly staff member named Amira. A middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, Amira led Zara to her new quarters, a room adorned with tasteful decor and soft hues that contrasted starkly with the simplicity of her former life. On the neatly made bed lay an assortment of carefully chosen clothes and accessories, symbolizing the opulence of her new surroundings. "If you need anything, I will be close by," Amira assured her warmly, though Zara could not shake the sensation of being an uninvited guest in her own existence. That night, as Zara stood on the balcony gazing out over the endless horizon, her thoughts turned inexorably to Rayyan. The ache of separation was nearly unbearable, yet she clung to the belief that enduring this sacrifice was the only way to secure a better future for him. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reflections. It was Rashid, who informed her with a curt tone that the following day they would visit his trusted physician. Zara nodded silently, knowing that there was no escape from the path fate had forced upon her. In the early hours of the next morning, Zara awoke in a mansion filled with silent echoes and luxury that felt both alien and suffocating. The restlessness of her first night was compounded by the relentless thoughts of the uncertain future ahead. Soon Amira reappeared to escort her to Rashid's clinic, a modern facility situated in the bustling metropolis of Doha. In the pristine, well-cleared office, Dr. Samier, a calm and reassuring figure, conducted a thorough examination before declaring that everything was in order to commence the planned procedures. Throughout the examination, Rashid maintained a distant presence, his composed gaze silently marking the unfolding events as merely another chapter in the fulfillment of his long-held ambitions. For him, it was all a pragmatic step toward ensuring the continuation of his legacy. Yet for Zara, it was an agonizing reminder that, in 9 months, she would be forced to part with the child that bore the remnants of her soul. Over the ensuing days, as Zara explored the sprawling mansion, its expansive library, the indoor pool guarded by imposing marble columns, and a music room filled with rare, exotic instruments, she could not shake the pervasive loneliness that seemed to shroud the property. Though the mansion was a testament to wealth and extravagance, it felt eerily vacant, as if the opulence had come at the expense of genuine human connection. Gradually, subtle cracks began to emerge in Rashid's otherwise impervious facade. Despite his strict adherence to the contract, Zara noticed fleeting moments of humanity in his actions. A gentle touch as he watered a cherished, rare plant in the garden, or a brief pause in his otherwise calculated routine as he gazed upon a photograph of someone long lost. Yet, these glimpses did little to alleviate the overwhelming sense of isolation and despair that had now become her constant companion. Even during a lavish, formal dinner hosted by Rashid for his business associates, where Zara was paraded as his special guest, the glittering gaiety of the event could not dispel the internal storm raging within her. After that fateful evening, as Zara returned to her room in exhaustion, she found solace only in the brief, comforting sound of Ryan's cheerful voice during a phone call from her neighbor. The fleeting moments of warmth and familial connection were tempered by a deep-seated sorrow and an ever-growing realization that her life had been irrevocably altered. In the quiet solitude of her new existence, every passing day underscored the loss of her autonomy and the inescapable truth that the path ahead was one of sacrifice and solitude. In the quiet aftermath of an evening filled with uncertainty, Zara, once a reluctant participant in an auction of human dignity, found herself slowly witnessing subtle changes in the mansion that now housed her life. The elegant estate, once merely a gilded cage, began to reveal unexpected layers of human connection and bittersweet solace. As days turned into weeks, the narrative of her existence started to take on a different hue, one where even the coldest hearts could harbor warmth beneath their steely facades. Zara recalled how, not long ago, she had observed Rashid tending to a delicate rose bush in the vast gardens behind the mansion. He had once mentioned, in a voice both measured and reflective, that caring for such a plant was akin to finding peace amid chaos. Those few simple words lingered in her mind like a whispered promise of hope. For the first time, she began to sense that Rashid was not merely the imposing benefactor who had sealed her fate with a signature. He was a man burdened with his own pain, a soul quietly seeking refuge from the storms of his past. A few days later, while she was wandering the labyrinthine corridors of the estate, Zara noticed Amira, the gentle caretaker who had always treated her with a soft kindness, beginning to share snippets of Rashid's hidden life. Over languid afternoons that stretched into the golden hours before dusk, Amira recounted stories of how Rashid had been forced into responsibility at an early age after the tragic passing of his parents. These heartfelt recollections painted a portrait of a man who, despite his formidable exterior, had been molded by loss and hardship. With each anecdote, Zara's hardened resolve wavered, replaced by a growing empathy for the man who now shared her confined world. Even as these moments of vulnerability surfaced, a persistent loneliness clung to the mansion like a shadow. Zara made a conscious effort not to allow herself to become too attached to the grandeur that surrounded her. She kept a firm reminder in her heart: her time here was temporary, a necessary passage before she would once again reclaim her life outside these opulent walls. And yet there were small moments of unexpected beauty: solitary walks through the immaculately manicured gardens, nights spent lying on her private balcony as she traced the constellations scattered across the midnight sky, that provided her with a fragile sense of solace. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped low behind the distant dunes, Rashid knocked gently on her door. When he entered, his posture was less rigid than it had been in the past, and his eyes carried a hint of softness that had been absent before. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Zara, bracing herself for further instructions or demands, invited him to sit. But instead of the usual clipped commands, Rashid's voice wavered, as if he were searching for the right words. "I know this arrangement is incredibly difficult for you," he began slowly. "I don't intend to make it any harder. I just want you to know that, despite everything, I truly respect your courage." Zara was taken aback. Here was a man who, until now, had projected only authority and cold resolve. His words now resonated with unexpected tenderness. In that brief conversation, she noticed a vulnerability in his gaze, a glimpse of a soul burdened by its own regrets. The encounter planted a seed of doubt in her mind about the image she had long held of him. Perhaps, beneath that austere exterior, there lay a wounded spirit struggling to come to terms with his own destiny. After Rashid's departure, Zara lingered in the stillness of her room, reflecting on their conversation. It was the first time since her arrival at the mansion that she had sensed the possibility of something deeper, a connection that went beyond the strict terms of their agreement. Days passed with an almost imperceptible, slow rhythm. Each moment added a new layer to the intricate dynamic between Zara and Rashid, as if they were two puzzle pieces slowly aligning amid the unpredictable circumstances that had brought them together. Their interactions remained subtle, never overtly affectionate. Yet each encounter left Zara with a sense of cautious optimism. She often found herself contemplating the enigma of the man who had compelled her to make such an immense sacrifice. Life at the mansion had settled into a predictable routine, but Zara's days were also punctuated by moments of introspection. The gardens had become her refuge, a sanctuary where the caress of the sun and the gentle murmur of water in the fountains soothed her aching soul. In these serene retreats, she felt a closeness to nature that contrasted starkly with the stark realities of her daily obligations. Zara couldn't help but notice that Rashid too spent considerable time in the gardens. Although he rarely initiated conversation, she sensed his observant eyes following her every step, as if he were silently scrutinizing not just her actions, but the layers of emotion that lay beneath her quiet exterior. One afternoon, as she strolled along a gravel path lined with blossoming jasmine, she saw him crouch beside a venerable olive tree, meticulously pruning its branches. When he sensed her presence, he briefly lifted his gaze and then resumed his task with an almost ritualistic precision. Breaking the silence, Zara ventured, "Do you enjoy gardening?" Without pausing, Rashid replied, his tone unexpectedly candid, "It helps me organize my thoughts." Though he offered little else, Zara perceived a subtle opening in his reticence, a glimmer of humanity that hinted at his willingness to share fragments of himself. Respecting his need for space, she nevertheless allowed her curiosity to grow, finding herself increasingly drawn to the mysteries hidden behind his austere persona. That evening, a curious shift occurred during dinner. For the first time in many solitary meals, Rashid joined Zara at the table. His presence, though calm and measured, carried an undeniable weight. As he poured himself a glass of wine, he broke the silence with a simple inquiry, "Are you adjusting?" Zara managed a steady response, "I think so, as best as I can." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, Zara saw in Rashid a profound sadness intertwined with determination. Though he reminded her that their arrangement was essential, necessary, perhaps, for reasons she could not fully fathom, his tone suggested that the burden he carried was not entirely his own. In the ensuing weeks, small gestures began to bridge the gulf between them. Rashid's once impervious demeanor started to soften. On one occasion, after Zara had mentioned in passing how much she missed the flavors of her homeland, Amira appeared with a tray laden with aromatic dishes prepared just for her. "Mr. Rashid requested these on your behalf," Amira explained with a tender smile, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride. Zara, though caught off guard, felt a warmth bloom in her heart. It was difficult to discern whether this act was born of obligation or genuine care, yet it left her with a sense of being noticed, truly seen. One crisp morning, Zara awoke to find a collection of books arranged with care on her bedside table. Among them were novels and tales that she had once mentioned in quiet conversation. The thoughtful gesture stirred something deep within her, a rare feeling of appreciation and connection. It was in these small acts, a gentle inquiry here, an unexpected gift there, that the barriers between them began to crumble, revealing hints of the complex layers beneath their formal contract. A defining moment arrived unexpectedly when Zara ventured into the mansion's music room. The door, left ajar as if inviting her in, yielded soft piano notes that drifted down the corridor like a soothing lullaby. Curious, she stepped inside and found Rashid seated at an antique grand piano, his fingers dancing hesitantly across the keys. "You play piano?" she asked, surprised by the unexpected scene. Startled, Rashid looked up, his expression a mix of embarrassment and vulnerability. "My mother taught me when I was a child," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper as he withdrew his hands from the keys. Zara's eyes sparkled with admiration as she remarked, "It's beautiful." For a moment, the music filled the room, speaking a language that transcended words, revealing the echoes of a past filled with both loss and tenderness. Their shared moments continued to evolve in unexpected ways. On a gentle afternoon in the garden, as Zara strolled along a sun-dappled path, she encountered a small injured bird that had tumbled from its branch. Instinctively, she knelt down and cradled the fragile creature with utmost care. Before she could even consider what to do next, Rashid appeared, watching her with an intensity that spoke of quiet admiration. "What will you do with it?" he inquired softly. "I'll tend to it until it is strong enough to fly again," Zara replied resolutely. In the depths of Rashid's gaze, she detected a glimmer of hope, a silent acknowledgement that even the smallest acts of compassion could bridge the chasm between them. As the days rolled by, the mansion's once oppressive solitude began to yield to a tentative atmosphere of connection. Even the corridors, lined with portraits and ancient artifacts, seemed to whisper secrets of bygone eras, inviting Zara to explore not just the rooms but the hidden stories that lay within. One night, as she wandered the quiet halls, she encountered Rashid in a moment of quiet introspection. His usually stern features were softened by fatigue, and when he gently inquired, "Can't sleep?" she admitted in a hushed tone, "Sometimes, with so much on my mind, sleep feels like a distant dream." To her surprise, he invited her to join him for tea in the mansion's grand library, a sanctuary filled with books that bore witness to centuries of human experience. There, amidst towering shelves and the comforting scent of old paper, their conversations stretched into the late hours of the night. Under the soft glow of antique lamps, Zara began to see past Rashid's mask. The conversations were punctuated with sincere laughter and moments of introspection, as if they were slowly unwrapping the layers of their shared burdens. Even the household staff, once distant observers, noticed the transformation. Amira, who had always been a kind confidant, now treated Zara as a dear friend, one who was no longer alone in her struggle. Yet even as small gestures of kindness wove their way into the fabric of daily life, the stark reality of their agreement still loomed. A relentless reminder that in 9 months, Zara would bear a child who was not hers to keep. One evening, as she stood on her private balcony and gazed at the infinite stars above, Rashid joined her. They sat in comfortable silence for several long moments, each lost in their own reflection. Breaking the quiet, he softly asked, "You think a lot about the future, don't you?" Zara replied, her voice tinged with melancholy, "I can't help it. All of this feels so temporary." Then, with a sudden intensity, Rashid turned to her and said, "The future can be built, Zara. It all depends on how we choose to handle the present." In that charged moment, she felt a warmth radiate through her, a promise, unspoken yet deeply felt, that their intertwined destinies might still hold the potential for transformation. As the days continued their quiet march forward, the mansion itself seemed to change. The once cold, intimidating corridors now echoed with softer laughter and whispered confidences. Amira's gentle presence, Rashid's thoughtful glances, and even the subtle gestures of care, from freshly delivered meals reminiscent of Zara's homeland to carefully curated stacks of literature, contributed to an atmosphere that was slowly, imperceptibly evolving. Zara began to notice changes within herself as well. The isolation that had once gripped her heart began to loosen its hold, replaced by the tentative belief that perhaps, in this place of enforced intimacy and unyielding duty, she might discover a measure of solace and even a sense of connection. The days merged into a tapestry of small, significant moments. A shared laugh over tea in the library, a quiet stroll through the fragrant gardens, and gentle exchanges in the dim light of the music room. Though their contract remained an unspoken barrier between them, Zara and Rashid found in each other a fragile alliance forged from mutual understanding and the heavy weight of their pasts. With every passing day, as the inevitability of their future loomed larger, Zara realized that even in the midst of a situation defined by sacrifice and obligation, there existed the possibility of forging a bond that transcended the terms of any agreement. For the first time in many long, arduous months, Zara felt a stirring of reconnection with a part of herself she believed had been lost forever. In the soft glow of early dawn that crept through the grand windows of the estate, she sensed that something within her was awakening, a delicate blend of hope and trepidation that had lain dormant beneath layers of sorrow and resignation. Yet even as this revival of spirit took root, she could not escape the realization that she was approaching a fateful crossroads. The intricate feelings slowly developing between her and Rashid, the enigmatic patriarch who had so drastically reshaped her destiny, threatened to complicate an already fraught situation. Zara was painfully aware that the tender connection blossoming between them could render everything even more convoluted. She often found herself lost in thought, contemplating the profound impact of these newfound emotions and the weight of a secret she had guarded with trembling resolve. The secret, concerning her son Rayyan, had grown heavier with each passing day. Rashid's potential discovery of the truth terrified her, and yet the burden of concealment was beginning to suffocate her from within. That fateful morning, as the estate awoke under a gentle light that softened the harsh angles of its opulent architecture, Zara felt a restless energy pulse through her. The delicate bond forming between her and Rashid was a surprise that stirred emotions she had long suppressed. Still, the future remained shrouded in uncertainty. After a meager breakfast served in the stately dining hall, she resolved to clear her troubled mind by wandering the extensive gardens. The manicured hedges, vibrant blossoms, and ancient olive trees offered her a temporary sanctuary. Yet even among the beauty, the calm was abruptly shattered when she heard Amira's urgent call echoing from near the greenhouse. Hurriedly, Zara retraced her steps back to the mansion's heart, where she discovered Rashid seated in the dimly lit living room, a black and white photograph clutched in his steady hand. His expression was a study in inscrutable tension, eyes dark and searching. "Who is this boy?" he asked, his tone controlled, yet laden with an unmistakable strain of disquiet. Zara's heart pounded as she realized that the photograph, once meticulously concealed, depicted Rayyan, the son she had kept hidden from the man who had come to define her new existence. With her voice trembling, she confessed, "He's my son." An oppressive silence settled between them, thick with unspoken pain and disappointment. Rashid slowly rose, his gaze never leaving hers, and the accusatory weight in his voice broke the quiet. "You lied to me. Why didn't you tell me from the start?" Tears welled in Zara's eyes, but she drew strength from a deep reservoir of resolve. "I was afraid," she admitted softly, her voice trembling with the raw honesty of her confession. "I feared that revealing him would only complicate everything further, and that you might deem me unworthy of the contract we agreed upon." The words spilled out in a rush of anguish and regret, leaving Rashid silent for several long moments as he processed the truth. Finally, he turned and walked slowly toward a large window that overlooked the sprawling gardens. "You should have trusted me," Rashid murmured, his tone a mix of disappointment and sorrow as he gazed out at the horizon. The sound of his voice was like a lament for something irretrievably lost, and Zara could no longer hold back her tears. She knew, deep in her soul, that this moment had the power to shatter the fragile bond they had been nurturing. Yet she also realized that the truth was no longer something she could hide. Later that evening, under the soft glow of a solitary lamp in the mansion's library, Rashid invited Zara to join him. The room exuded a quiet intimacy, with its dark wooden shelves lined with ancient tomes and the warm light casting delicate shadows on the walls. Seated in his Kustrashidi leather chair, Rashid pushed a folder of documents toward her with deliberate care. "I have reviewed the terms of our agreement," he stated bluntly. "There is nothing in it that anticipates you keeping secrets of this nature." His voice was steady, yet beneath the formality lay an undercurrent of hurt. Zara's heart raced as panic began to claw at her, yet she managed to whisper, "Please, don't send me away. I will fulfill my obligations, I promise." But Rashid raised a hand to gently halt her protest. "I am not suggesting that," he replied, his tone softening just a fraction. "What I require is trust. Trust that we can rebuild what has been compromised. Slowly, he slid a single sheet of paper from the folder toward her. "I want you to meet Rayan. You are permitted to visit him on one condition. He must not learn the truth about our arrangement. Not yet." Zara blinked, her mind reeling at the unexpected generosity intermingled with the heavy stipulation. The compassion behind Rashid's words was as startling as it was confusing. "Why are you doing this?" she managed to ask in a near whisper, her voice laden with guilt and wonder. With a heavy sigh, Rashid folded his hands on the table and responded with a surprising candor. "Because I understand what it is to grow up without answers. I want your son to feel the presence of a mother, even if only for a brief time." Those words, spoken with an intensity that revealed hidden scars of his own past, resonated deeply with Zara. In that moment, she began to glimpse the reasons behind Rashid's seemingly unyielding exterior. He was not solely driven by a desire for an heir. He too bore the weight of unresolved loss and loneliness. The following day, Zara embarked on a journey to visit Rayan, a long, winding drive that seemed to bridge the gap between her painful present and a fragile hope for the future. With each mile, the memories of a once simpler life stirred within her. Upon arrival at a modest yet charming residence nestled at the edge of a quiet village, her emotions surged uncontrollably. The moment Rayan saw her, his face lit up with unadulterated joy. "Mommy, you're back!" he exclaimed, running into her open arms. In that embrace, Zara clung to him as if to stave off the inevitable separation, feeling a bittersweet mixture of joy and heartache. They spent the day immersed in the innocent delights of shared laughter and gentle play, the echoes of their past lives mingling with the fragile present. But as the golden hues of twilight surrendered to the somber tones of night, Zara felt the weight of impending farewell descend upon her. When the time came for their parting, Rayan clung to her tightly, his wide eyes pleading, "When will you come back?" "Soon, my love," she promised, though even as the words left her lips, she knew the promise was clouded by uncertainty. Returning to the mansion later that night, Zara was overwhelmed by a profound sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. In the quiet living room, Rashid awaited her with an expression that blended concern with an inscrutable calm. "How is he?" he inquired softly, the genuine warmth in his tone touching her wounded heart. Settling onto the sofa opposite him, Zara confessed in a shaky voice, "He's well, happy, but it is excruciatingly hard to leave him." Rashid merely nodded, his eyes conveying 1,000 unspoken emotions. No words were needed, his silent understanding spoke volumes. In the days that followed, a subtle but undeniable shift occurred in the dynamics of their interactions. The cold formality that had once defined their relationship began to yield to a newfound sense of mutual respect and even affection. Simple moments, a shared meal in the quiet dining hall, an unexpected conversation during an evening walk in the lush gardens, became imbued with meaning. One evening, as they sat together in the hushed sanctuary of the library, Rashid surprised Zara by divulging a personal memory. "My mother passed away when I was very young," he said softly, his voice heavy with reminiscence. "My father was always distant, consumed by his business, and I was forced to shoulder responsibilities before I even knew what they meant." Zara listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion as she whispered, "That must have been so difficult for you." Rashid's response was measured. "It was, but it shaped me into who I am today. Yet, there is always an emptiness that I cannot fill." That confession, raw and unguarded, drew them closer together. In the ensuing weeks, the bond between Zara and Rashid deepened, evolving from a mere transactional association into a relationship defined by empathy and understanding. What had begun as an arrangement dictated by necessity now bore the tentative marks of shared vulnerability. Still, both were acutely aware that time was a relentless adversary and that the shadow of their contract loomed over every interaction. In the midst of this transformation, Zara continued to find solace in the comforting rhythms of daily life. Her mornings were spent strolling through the expansive gardens, her afternoons absorbed in quiet reflection within the mansion's venerable library, and her nights filled with moments of introspection as she gazed at the starlit sky from her private balcony. Yet despite these small refuges, the thought of her son remained an ever-present ache in her heart, a reminder of the sacrifices she had made. One crisp morning, as she sipped her coffee in a sunlit corner of the drawing room, Rashid appeared unexpectedly. His demeanor was noticeably more relaxed, and his expression carried an uncharacteristic hint of friendliness. "I want you to come with me today," he said, breaking the silence with a gentle invitation. Intrigued, yet cautious, Zara asked, "Where to?" Rashid explained, "I have a meeting at one of my family's retreats, a quiet place where I think you will feel at home." Although she hesitated briefly, the prospect of leaving the mansion's oppressive confines proved too alluring to resist. The car ride was marked by a peaceful silence as they left behind the city's clamor. After nearly an hour on the open road, they arrived at a secluded property nestled among rolling sand dunes. This modest abode, constructed in a traditional style reminiscent of a simpler era, radiated a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold grandeur of the mansion. "This was my mother's sanctuary," Rashid revealed as they stepped out of the car. "Whenever she needed solace, she would come here." Zara followed him through a quaint courtyard decorated with hand-woven rugs and antique lanterns, breathing in the fragrance of aromatic herbs that filled the air. They eventually reached a small terrace that offered a panoramic view of the undulating desert. The silence was absolute, broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind. Settling into one of the time-worn wooden chairs, Zara allowed herself a rare moment of peace. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Rashid confessed after a long pause. Zara gazed at the vast horizon, murmuring, "It's beautiful." For a few precious moments, they shared a wordless understanding, a tacit acknowledgement of the deep, unspoken wounds that bound them together. After returning to the mansion, the evolving relationship between Zara and Rashid began to weave itself into the fabric of daily life. He gradually involved her in decisions regarding the estate, inviting her opinions on matters both trivial and significant. One evening at dinner, Rashid broached an unexpected subject. "I've been considering renovating the mansion," he said casually. "I want to create a space that feels welcoming, a home rather than just an imposing structure." Zara, taken aback by the notion, raised her eyebrows in surprise. "And what do you envision?" she inquired gently. Rashid hesitated before replying. "A future where warmth and family are not just fleeting ideals but lived realities." Though these words offered a glimmer of hope, Zara knew that many obstacles still lay ahead. Later that afternoon, while wandering the flower-lined paths of the garden, she encountered Amira carrying a tray laden with tea and cookies. The usually reserved housekeeper appeared radiant and joyful, prompting Zara to ask, "You seem especially cheerful today, Amira. Did something happen?" Amira's eyes sparkled as she replied, "It's simply wonderful to see how things are changing here. The estate has never felt so alive." Zara's face warmed with a mixture of gratitude and bittersweet realization. Amira was speaking of the shift in dynamics between Zara and Rashid, a change that hinted at the possibility of a future beyond the confines of their contract. As the day drew to a close, Zara's thoughts swirled with the myriad of changes that had marked her journey. Though uncertainty still loomed large over the horizon, she was determined to embrace the present with all its joys and sorrows. Each step forward, every shared smile or tear, wove a new narrative that defied the cold strictures of the past. In that evolving tapestry of life, Zara clung to the hope that, one day, trust and compassion might conquer even the most deeply entrenched barriers. Over the past few days, it had become unmistakable that something tender and transformative was blossoming within the walls of the estate. Zara, who had long borne the heavy burdens of her secret and her constrained life, began to observe that Rashid, once the cold and implacable figure who governed every aspect of her fate, was slowly changing too. Their interactions, which had previously been marked by terse formality, now stretched into long, meandering conversation. The barriers that once separated them were eroding, revealing raw vulnerabilities that neither had anticipated sharing. One afternoon, as they sat together in a sunlit corner of the estate's library, Rashid opened up in a way that deeply moved Zara. With his voice thick with emotion, he confessed, "I never knew how to cope with losing my mother. She was the anchor of our family, and when she was gone, everything fell apart." His words, laden with the weight of personal loss, struck a chord in Zara's heart. Having experienced her own profound losses, she felt an immediate surge of empathy. In that moment, the chasm between them narrowed further, and a fragile bond was forged through shared sorrow and understanding. Yet, despite the growing closeness between them, Zara could not dismiss the ever-present barrier of the contract that had dictated her life since that fateful auction. Even as she found solace and a tentative companionship with Rashid, the reality of their arrangement and the secret she harbored about her son Rayyan loomed over her like a dark cloud. Night after night, as she lay awake in the quiet solitude of her room, Zara wrestled with the dual weight of her emerging feelings and her unspoken responsibilities. The possibility of Rashid discovering the truth terrified her, even as the need for honesty warred with the desire to preserve the fragile peace they had begun to build. One restless evening, as the estate settled into a hushed calm, Rashid knocked on Zara's door. His voice, unusually unsettled, invited her to talk. Sitting in the chair beside her bed, he began, "I know we have our limitations, but I want you to know that I'm trying to understand what all of this means." His words, tentative yet earnest, sent Zara's heart racing with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I'm trying too," she replied quietly, her tone laden with vulnerability. Rashid's face softened with relief as he absorbed her words, and for the first time in a long while, both were willing to face the uncertainties ahead together. The transformation in their relationship did not go unnoticed by the staff of the estate. Amira, ever the observant caretaker, remarked to a colleague that Rashid now seemed lighter, almost more human in his interactions with Zara. Even the other employees exchanged knowing smiles whenever they caught sight of the pair, deep in conversation. Zara, for her part, began to view the once oppressive mansion as more than just a temporary holding place. It was slowly becoming a home, a place where she was building something new and fragile, even if she was still uncertain of what the future might bring. At the end of each day, as dusk fell and the stars began to shimmer in the inky sky, Zara found herself at a turning point. The connection between her and Rashid deepened with every small gesture, every lingering glance, and every conversation that stretched into the night. Yet each shared moment also nudged her ever closer to the reality that their contractual arrangement still held power over them. One crisp morning, while Rashid was absorbed in reviewing documents in his private office, Zara entered quietly with a tray of freshly brewed coffee. Her presence caught him by surprise, and for a long moment the silence between them was weighted with unspoken thoughts. "I thought you could use a break," she offered with a gentle smile. Rashid's response was a simple "thank you," but the gratitude in his tone was unmistakable. As the days progressed, their conversations began to explore deeper territories. In one reflective exchange, as Zara sat across from Rashid in his dimly lit office, she ventured, "Do you feel you've made the right decision so far?" Rashid paused, his gaze softening as he confessed, "I'm not sure. Life has taught me to be pragmatic, yet sometimes I wonder if my rigidity has kept me from what truly matters." His admission, raw and sincere, revealed a side of him that he had long kept hidden behind the facade of duty and family expectations. Zara sensed that this moment of vulnerability was not only a personal catharsis for him, but also a bridge towards something more authentic between them. Their daily routines began to shift in subtle but significant ways. Rashid started inviting Zara to accompany him to meetings and social events, occasions that once would have seemed unthinkable for someone in her position. At a charity dinner held in a lavish banquet hall, Rashid introduced her as his companion. While the guests exchanged curious glances, Rashid remained indifferent to their opinions. Yet Zara, unaccustomed to such attention, felt a flutter of unease. In a quiet moment away from prying eyes, Rashid gently squeezed her hand and murmured, "Are you okay?" His concern, though understated, provided comfort and a reassuring promise that she was not alone. Over time, the moments of intimacy between Zara and Rashid multiplied. They began to share more about their personal histories. Rashid spoke of his childhood, a time marked by the overwhelming expectations imposed by his family's legacy and the loneliness that accompanied his early responsibilities. He recounted, with a hint of regret, the absence of nurturing warmth after his mother's death and the relentless pursuit of honor instilled by his father. In return, Zara recounted her own struggles, her tireless efforts to raise Rayyan amid financial hardship and the constant battle to preserve a semblance of dignity in a world that had often denied her both. Rashid listened with genuine attentiveness, and in those exchanges, Zara saw a side of him that was both profoundly human and unexpectedly tender. One particularly memorable night, as they walked together through the moonlit gardens of the estate, Rashid paused abruptly. Under the gentle illumination of the stars, he looked deep into Zara's eyes and said, "I want you to know that despite everything, you've shown me things I'd never noticed before. You've reminded me that there is more to life than obligations and contracts, that sometimes we need to make room for something new." Zara's heart raced as she absorbed his words. In that tender moment, it became unmistakably clear that she was falling for him, even as the looming contract remained an unyielding reminder of their complicated arrangement. The evolution of their bond was further evidenced by the subtle shifts in the atmosphere of the estate. Amira began treating Zara with the warmth and familiarity of a long-standing family member, and other staff members exchanged smiles and nods whenever they saw Rashid and Zara together. However, beneath the surface of these hopeful changes, Zara could not shake the persistent anxiety that every passing moment was drawing her closer to an inevitable turning point. A moment when the secret of Zara and the demands of their contract would clash with the tender love they were beginning to cultivate. One afternoon in the library, as Zara was absorbed in reading, Rashid entered with a somber expression. "We need to talk," he announced softly, closing the door behind him. Zara set her book aside, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely concealing her apprehension. Rashid sat down across from her, his hands clasped together as if gathering strength. "We need to discuss the future," he began, his tone measured yet determined. "I know the contract dictates what should happen after the baby is born, but things have changed." Zara's breath caught in her throat as she struggled to comprehend his meaning. "What do you mean by that?" she inquired hesitantly. Rashid leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "I want to consider other options. I don't want you to simply leave when the time comes." His words, though simple, carried the weight of an unspoken promise. Zara's heart pounded with both hope and fear. Hope for a future where their bond might endure, and fear of the challenges that such a future might bring. "And what does that mean?" she finally managed to ask. "It means we need to find a way to make this work. Together," Rashid replied firmly. His declaration resonated deep within her, igniting a spark of hope that, despite all the obstacles, there might be a path forward for them. In the days that followed, Zara and Rashid began to speak more openly about their dreams, their fears, and the uncertain future that awaited them. Each conversation, whether in the quiet intimacy of the estate's corridors or during brief moments shared over tea, chipped away at the rigid boundaries imposed by their past and the contract that had once seemed absolute. Rashid, haunted by the weight of his family's expectations and the memory of a strict, unyielding father, slowly allowed himself to imagine a life not solely defined by duty. Zara, too, dared to envision a future where she and Rashid could perhaps find a measure of stability and even love in the warmth of Rashid's unexpected compassion. One evening, as they sat on the terrace, watching the stars shimmer over the gently undulating landscape, Rashid turned to Zara and said, "I didn't know what love was until you came into my life." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow this time, but from the overwhelming realization that something profoundly beautiful had taken root between them. The once cold and isolated estate was beginning to transform into a home, imbued with the promise of a shared future that defied the strictures of their original arrangement. Their journey together reached a poignant new chapter when Rashid invited Zara on a trip to the vast desert. Early one morning, they set off in a sleek vehicle, leaving behind the familiar confines of the estate. As the car wound its way along endless stretches of arid land, the landscape transformed into a breathtaking panorama of rolling dunes and shimmering heat. Rashid explained that this retreat had once been his mother's sanctuary, a place where she sought solace and clarity. When they arrived at the modest, traditional dwelling nestled amidst the dunes, Zara was struck by the simplicity and quiet charm of the place. The walls, adorned with vibrant textiles and antique lanterns, exuded a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cool formality of the mansion. On the sunlit terrace overlooking the desert, the two of them sat in comfortable silence. A gentle breeze whispered through the sparse vegetation, carrying with it the promise of renewal. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Rashid confessed after a long pause. Zara gazed out at the horizon, marveling at the beauty of the untamed landscape. In that moment, the burdens of the past seemed to lift ever so slightly, replaced by a tentative hope for the future. A future they might build together, one step at a time. Beneath a vast sky where golden sands stretched out like an endless ocean, Zara and Rashid journeyed together toward a secluded oasis hidden amid the arid wilderness. As their vehicle slowed to a stop on a dusty path flanked by towering dunes, Rashid explained that this oasis was a place of profound personal significance. "This is my retreat," he said softly, his eyes reflecting memories of a time when he sought clarity in the heart of the desert. "Whenever I need to remember that even amid desolation there is life, I come here." Together they walked along the edge of a crystalline pool, its waters shimmering under the noonday sun, and Zara felt as though the moment marked a turning point in the unfolding story of their lives. Under the generous shade of a solitary palm tree, they sat side by side. The soft rustle of fronds overhead and the gentle lap of water provided a peaceful backdrop as Rashid began to reveal the burdens he had long carried. "I spent so much of my life trapped by the past and the relentless expectations of others," he confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "For so long I never allowed myself the space to discover what I truly desired. Until now, I've only known duty and obligation." Zara listened intently, her heart pounding with empathy. "And what is it that you want now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rashid turned his gaze toward her, the intensity of his eyes softened by the sunlight. "I want to live differently," he declared. "I want to build something real, a future defined not by contracts or imposed responsibilities, but by genuine connection." Though tears threatened to spill from Zara's eyes, she fought to hold them back, cherishing every word as if it were a fragile promise of a better tomorrow. After their sojourn at the oasis, they returned to the grand estate, where both sensed a subtle yet palpable change in the atmosphere. The mansion, once a cold fortress of formality, now seemed to breathe with a newfound lightness. Yet amid these hopeful shifts, Zara's mind was burdened by lingering uncertainties. At night, as she lay on her balcony gazing at the vast tapestry of stars, her thoughts often turned to her son Rayyan, and the secret that weighed heavily on her heart. She knew that every moment of intimacy shared with Rashid edged her closer to a critical juncture, a point at which the past might clash with the promise of the future. One evening, while the night wrapped the estate in a velvet silence, Rashid joined Zara on her balcony, carrying 2 delicate cups of tea. He handed one to her and, after a few moments of reflective quiet, said in a low, earnest tone, "You know, Zara, I never imagined I'd meet someone who would make me question everything I once believed. You've shown me that it's possible to reach for more than duty and legacy." Zara looked into his eyes, feeling the sincere weight of his admission. "And you've shown me that in the midst of pain there is strength," she replied, her voice trembling with both gratitude and vulnerability. "I wouldn't have come this far without you." In the days that followed, Rashid took deliberate steps to transform the nature of their arrangement. He revisited the terms of the binding contract that had once dictated every facet of their intertwined fates. Although certain clauses concerning the future of the child remained unchanged, Rashid made it abundantly clear that he wished to find a solution that was equitable to both of them. Zara felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as she considered the possibility of a future where her needs and her love might finally be acknowledged. The mansion's atmosphere began to shift perceptibly, with even the ever-watchful Amira, the estate's devoted caretaker, remarking that Rashid's once impenetrable demeanor had softened considerably. "I always knew that deep down Mr. Rashid had a good heart," Amira confided to Zara one afternoon. "He simply needed someone to help him find his way." Zara smiled, her heart buoyed by the unexpected kindness and the promise of change. Yet even as the positive changes became apparent, the future still loomed uncertain. The contract, a document that had once been her only refuge in desperate times, continued to cast its long shadow. Late at night, Zara often reflected on the sacrifices she had made and the toll they had taken, not only on her, but also on her son, Rayyan, who was now living in another city. The knowledge that once the baby was born, she would be forced to leave him behind weighed heavily on her spirit. One morning, while strolling through the mansion's resplendent gardens, Zara sought solace among the vibrant blooms and ancient trees. Pausing near the central fountain, she found Amira tending carefully to the delicate water features and decided to confide in her. "Amira," she began hesitantly, "do you think I can truly trust Rashid?" Amira looked up, her eyes kind and reassuring. "Mr. Rashid is a man of his word," she said softly. "He never makes promises he doesn't intend to keep, and he's as human as the rest of us. He's trying to balance what he feels with what he must do. Though conflicted, Zara felt a small measure of comfort in those words. The following day, Rashid invited Zara to visit an orphanage he had long supported, a place where the laughter of children and the warmth of communal care filled the air with hope. Upon arrival, they were greeted with joyful shouts and exuberant hugs from the children. Zara watched, her heart swelling as she observed Rashid interact with the youngsters. His usually stern expression softened into a gentle smile as he bent down to speak kindly with them. "You truly care about them," Zara remarked quietly, moved by the sight. Rashid looked at her, his voice firm yet tender. "They remind me that life is about more than just responsibilities and business. There is beauty in simplicity and hope in every smile." In that moment, Zara realized that Rashid was ready to embrace change, ready to relinquish some of the control he had clung to for so long. Back at the mansion, Rashid made a bold decision. He would revise the contract. He convened with his legal advisors and reworked several clauses to ensure that Zara would retain more freedom and the ability to maintain contact with Rayan after the baby's birth. When he presented the newly revised contract to Zara, her hands trembled as she read the adjustments. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, her voice brimming with emotion. Rashid met her gaze steadily. "Because I want you to know that you are not alone in this," he replied. "I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me, not because you are obligated." Tears streamed down Zara's face, not of sorrow, but of relief and gratitude. In that moment, it felt as if the once unyielding barriers were beginning to crumble. In the ensuing weeks, the bond between Zara and Rashid deepened further. Their conversations, once confined to matters of duty, now flowed with openness and mutual care. One evening on the terrace, as the fading light bathed the horizon in hues of orange and pink, Rashid reached out and gently took Zara's hand. "I want to meet Rayan," he declared. The suggestion took Zara by surprise, and she remained silent for several long moments, processing the enormity of his words. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. Rashid's reply was confident and warm. "Absolutely. He is a part of your life, and I want to know every part of it. I hope that, together, we can create a family that embraces all of you." Overwhelmed by the prospect of finally including her son in their shared life, Zara felt her heart open in a way she had never experienced before. The visit to Rayan's home was filled with a blend of anxiety and anticipation. As they arrived at a modest residence in a nearby town, Rayan, seeing his mother, ran into her arms, exclaiming, "Mommy." Rashid observed the tender reunion with a soft smile, his heart evidently touched by the scene unfolding before him. When Zara introduced Rayan to Rashid, the young boy looked up curiously and asked, "Are you my mom's friend?" Rashid knelt to meet Rayan's gaze and answered warmly, "Yes, I am, and I hope that one day we can all be friends." The natural ease of their interaction filled Zara with a sense of hope and validation that she had long craved. Back at the mansion, Zara began to feel that she was truly building something lasting. Not just a temporary arrangement dictated by a contract, but a future founded on trust, love, and genuine commitment. One serene evening, as she and Rashid sat together on the terrace under a starlit sky, Rashid softly assured her, "I know we still have many challenges ahead, but I am willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." In that moment, as the cool night air wrapped around them, Zara's heart swelled with hope. She believed, for the first time, that a future together was indeed possible. Life at the once impersonal estate gradually transformed into something resembling a true home. The earlier tension had given way to warmth, and the bond between Zara and Rashid was now defined by openness and shared dreams. One morning, over coffee on the terrace, Rashid surprised her with an unexpected suggestion. "I want Rayan to live here with us," he said resolutely. Zara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious?" she asked, struggling to process the magnitude of his offer. Rashid continued, "If we're to build something genuine together, he should be a part of it from the very beginning." Though the thought of having her son close filled her with joy, a part of her remained cautious. "And what about the contract?" she questioned. Rashid took a steadying breath and replied, "The contract doesn't have to be a barrier. We can adjust its terms so that Rayan has a place here without compromising either of our futures." Deeply moved by Rashid's willingness to reshape his life for her sake, Zara remained silent, letting the significance of his words sink in. Preparations for Rayhan's arrival began immediately. Rashid instructed Amira to prepare a warm, inviting room filled with personal touches suggested by Zara, items that reminded Rayhan of the home he once knew. As the days passed, the mansion staff marveled at the transformation. The once formidable estate now resonated with laughter and gentle chatter, and the bond between Zara and Rashid, strengthened by shared vulnerability and commitment, shone as a beacon of hope for the future. On the day of Rayhan's arrival, Zara was overcome with anxious anticipation. The grand, ornate doors of the Al-Mansour estate slowly swung open, revealing the bright morning light that spilled across the marble floor. In that moment, every care and every past sorrow seemed to vanish as young Rayhan, barefoot, with wide, curious eyes, dashed into her waiting arms. Zara clutched him tightly, as if to shield him from every hardship that had ever haunted her. "This place is huge, Mom!" the little boy exclaimed, his voice trembling with wonder as he took in the opulent surroundings. Rashid, who had been observing from a respectful distance, stepped forward with measured grace. He knelt to Rayhan's level and extended his hand in a gesture that was both formal and tender. "Welcome, Rayhan. I hope you'll like it here," he said softly. The child, shy yet inquisitive, shook Rashid's hand and offered a tentative smile. In that simple act, Zara noticed how, despite his usual reserve, Rashid was making a genuine effort to connect with her son, a silent promise that he too was ready to embrace the family he had helped create. The first few days after Rayhan's arrival were a whirlwind of adjustments and new discoveries. Rayhan, with his boundless curiosity, quickly adapted to the luxurious environment of the estate. He scampered from room to room, exploring every hidden nook and cranny, while peppering everyone with innocent questions about the grand mansion and its mysterious inhabitants. Rashid, although still measured in his speech and manner, answered each of Rayhan's questions with surprising patience and warmth. One evening, as Zara tucked Rayhan into a plush, white bed adorned with intricate patterns, he looked up with earnest eyes and asked, "Mom, is Mr. Rashid a good man?" Zara paused, startled by the simplicity of the inquiry, then smiled gently. "He is. He's learning to be better every day," she answered sincerely. Rayhan's small face brightened at her words before he drifted into a peaceful sleep. Later that night, Zara sat by Rayhan's side, watching his gentle, serene breathing. For the first time in a long while, she felt as though she were truly on the right path. In the days that followed, the bond between Rashid and Rayhan grew steadily. They spent lazy afternoons playing chess in the sunlit library, or taking long, leisurely walks through the meticulously maintained gardens. Rashid, who had once been a distant figure defined solely by duty and obligation, now revealed a more relaxed and caring side. On one such walk, as the trio strolled along a winding path bordered by fragrant jasmine and towering palms, Rayhan suddenly halted and looked up at Rashid with the unfiltered curiosity of youth. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. Rashid chuckled, the sound soft and genuine. "I do," he replied, his eyes warm as he added, "She's a very special woman." Rayhan's smile, pure and unburdened, served as an affirmation of the quiet growing trust between them, a bond that promised to mend old wounds. One calm afternoon, Zara ventured into Rashid's spacious, book-lined office, carrying a cup of freshly brewed tea. Hesitantly, she stepped inside and inquired, "May I interrupt?" Rashid looked up from the documents he was reviewing, and with a gentle smile that betrayed his earlier stern demeanor, he responded, "Always." Zara settled on the nearby sofa, watching as he resumed his work. The sight of him so focused and dedicated provided an unexpected comfort. Breaking the silence, she remarked softly, "You're working so hard for us." Rashid set his pen down and met her gaze directly. "Because you are worth it," he said simply, his tone laden with a sincerity that made Zara's heart race with newfound hope. In that quiet moment, it became clear that despite the obstacles they had faced, they were building something real together. As the months passed, the once imposing Al-Mansour mansion began to exude a different kind of energy, a warmth born of mutual respect, shared dreams, and slowly healing hearts. The relationship between Rashid and Zara deepened, and Rayhan quickly became an integral part of their lives. The laughter of the child, the soft murmur of affectionate exchanges, and the sparkle of understanding in their eyes imbued every corner of the mansion with a sense of home that had long been absent. Even the estate's longtime staff noticed the change. Amira, always observant, commented one afternoon as she dusted the ornate furniture, "I always knew Mr. Rashid had a good heart, he just needed someone to help him find it." Zara could only smile at such kind words, feeling a surge of gratitude for the transformation unfolding around her. Yet, amid all the joy, Zara's heart was not free from lingering worries. Every night as she lay on the terrace, under the soft glow of countless stars, she reflected on the sacrifices she had made. The contract that once bound her to a life of despair still lurked in her memories, even as it lost its hold on her present. She often thought of Rayan, who, though now living with them, still represented the many years of separation and sacrifice that had defined her past. The fear that the weight of her former obligations might someday intrude upon this fragile happiness was a constant undercurrent in her thoughts. One particularly significant afternoon, Rashid surprised Zara with a heartfelt gesture that seemed to erase the lingering remnants of that old contract. Gathering his legal advisors, he initiated a complete revision of the terms that had once dictated every aspect of their arrangement. The new document granted Zara greater freedom and, most importantly, secured her right to maintain a close bond with Rayan after the baby was born. When Rashid presented the revised contract to her, Zara's hands trembled as she read the carefully worded changes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely concealing the mix of relief and lingering apprehension. Rashid met her eyes, his expression earnest and unguarded. "Because I want you to know that you are not alone in this journey. I want you to stay with me, not out of obligation, but because we choose to be together," he declared softly. Tears streamed down Zara's face, tears of relief, gratitude, and hope. In that moment, the old barriers seemed to crumble away, replaced by a promise of shared futures and unconditional support. The transformation did not stop there. Over the ensuing days, Rashid grew bolder in his desire to integrate their lives fully. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Rashid took Zara's hand and said, "I want to meet Rayan properly, to know every part of your life." The idea took Zara by surprise, and she hesitated before asking, "Are you sure?" Rashid's reply was immediate and resolute. "Absolutely. He is a part of you, and I want him to be a part of our family." The prospect of including Rayan in their shared future filled Zara with both joy and a quiet trepidation. Later, during a visit to Rayan's current home, the reunion was filled with emotion. As soon as the door swung open, Rayan ran into Zara's arms, exclaiming joyfully, "Mommy!" Rashid watched with a gentle smile as the three of them embraced, a moment that solidified the bonds of a real family. Back at the mansion, life began to take on a new rhythm. The relationship between Zara and Rashid, once defined solely by the constraints of an imposed contract, was now blossoming into something genuine and enduring. One evening, as the cool night air settled over the estate, Rashid and Zara sat together on the terrace under a vast, starlit sky. Rashid, his voice soft yet determined, said, "I know we still have many challenges ahead, but I want you to know that I am willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." In that simple statement lay a promise of unwavering commitment. A promise that filled Zara's heart with hope and certainty that their future could be built on love rather than obligation. Then came the moment that would forever redefine their lives. On a day filled with both nervous energy and quiet anticipation, the time arrived for the long-awaited birth of their child. Zara's contractions began, and as the mansion stirred with urgent whispers, Amira rushed to alert Rashid. "Zara is going into labor," Amira announced, her eyes wide with urgency. Rashid immediately gathered Zara's trembling hand and led her to the waiting vehicle. The drive to the hospital was tense and filled with whispered reassurances. "Everything will be fine, Zara. I'm here with you," he murmured repeatedly, his tone a soothing balm against the rising tide of fear. At the hospital, as the medical team took over, Rashid refused to leave Zara's side. He stayed with her through every agonizing hour of labor, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement, and offering silent strength. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the room was filled with the soft, miraculous cry of a newborn. Rashid, overcome with emotion, looked at the tiny boy cradled in Zara's arms. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his eyes brimming with tears. "Perfect." Exhausted yet overjoyed, Zara smiled through her tears. This was the moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter for their family. A few days later, as Zara rested in the quiet sanctuary of their bedroom with the baby nestled against her, Rashid entered carrying an envelope. He sat beside her, his expression a blend of seriousness and tenderness. "Zara, I want you to know something," he began, carefully opening the envelope. In a decisive gesture, he tore the old contract into tiny pieces, letting each shred fall to the floor, like remnants of a painful past. "Everything I have done has been for you and our family," he declared. "I don't want any contract, no document, to define our future." Rashid then took Zara's hands in his and with eyes filled with unwavering love, knelt before her. "Zara, you have brought light into my life. You have taught me what true love is and what it means to have a family. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, raising our children and facing every challenge together. Will you marry me?" Overwhelmed by joy, Zara's heart raced as tears streamed down her face. With barely a whisper, she replied, "Yes. Rashid, I will." At that very moment, Rayhan, who had been peeking through the door, ran toward them and wrapped his arms around their legs. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed, his voice filled with exuberance. Rashid lifted Rayhan into his arms, and together, amid joyous celebrations and heartfelt embraces, they marked the beginning of a brand new chapter. The months that followed were filled with preparations for a wedding that would blend traditions and honor their unique journey. The estate transformed into a fairy tale setting, adorned with vibrant, exotic flowers and delicate lights that merged both Arabic elegance and Western charm. On the big day, under a radiant sun, Zara looked breathtaking in a flowing white gown accented with touches of gold, while little Rayhan proudly carried the rings. As she walked down the aisle, Rashid's eyes shone with emotion, and he whispered, "You look breathtaking." Their vows, simple yet profound, promised love, respect, and partnership, sealed with a kiss that was met with heartfelt applause. The reception became a jubilant celebration of cultures and love, a symphony of traditional melodies and the joyful laughter of children playing, heralding the start of a future built on unity and hope. Under the shimmering desert stars, Rashid and Zara danced together, their hearts aligned in the knowledge that, despite every challenge, they had forged a love that would overcome every barrier. As Rayhan played with the baby and laughter echoed throughout the night, they exchanged tender glances, filled with promises of a shared future, one where love, unity, and family would always prevail. And so, Zara and Rashid's journey, which began with desperation and uncertainty, blossomed into a story of redemption, healing, and the transformative power of love. Their bond reminds us that even when life leads us down paths we never imagined, it's never too late to rewrite our future. With courage, forgiveness, and hope. What about you? Do you believe that love can grow from the most unexpected beginnings? Could you forgive someone who changed for the better? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more powerful, emotional stories just like this one. We'd love to hear from you. What part of this story moved you the most? Type it below.